Production by Liang Gu, The Fire of Youth, author, Qing Shaoqing. 1. Auditory competition. I am not boasting. Although my hearing is not as good as that of my old friend Hawthorne, it is not that weak. At dawn that day, Hawthorne only said softly, "A woman." I suddenly woke up from my sleep. I looked out the window, and the dawn light was already white. In this late autumn, with this light color, it was estimated that it was already 6 o'clock. At this time in the summer, Hawthorne should have gotten up early and gone out to do morning exercises. Get some fresh air. It's autumn now, so we're getting up a little late. Since he is still lying on the bed peacefully at this moment, how can he say that a woman is not a woman? Could it be that he also had some sweet dreams, in which he met a woman, a young woman? Poor E didn't sleep all night. E must be here for some murder case. A series of exclamations came out of Hawthorne's mouth, which surprised me. Is Hawthorne awake at this moment? Or is he talking in his sleep? If he is awake, he is obviously still sleeping in bed, so why are he talking like this? Hawthorne suddenly called me, "Bao Lang, wake up. There is a murder coming. Don't dream." I sat up from the bed and replied, "I've already woken up." "You were just dreaming." Hawthorne also hurriedly got out of bed, pointed to the door and said, "Just wait and see if I am dreaming." Suma came upstairs to report. Sure enough, there was a snapping sound on the door. Then the old woman's voice: "Gentlemen, are you awake?" There was a female guest below who said something extremely important. "Yi Zhang is waiting." Hawthorne responded, "We'll come down." Sue's mother slowly went downstairs. Only then did I realize that what Hawthorne had just said was not just talking in his sleep. He could already hear the sounds below and knew there was a woman and a murder. It seems that his hearing is better than mine after all. I said, "You are probably awake already." After listening to the conversation between the visitor and Sue's mother, I realized that it was a woman who had not slept all night and came here to report the murder. Yes or no? Hawthorne shook his head while dressing and replied, "No." I didn't hear a word of the female guest's voice. My assertion is based on only 2 voices. I asked in surprise, "What 2 sounds?" One was the sound of wooden shoes with wooden heels, and the other was Sue's mother's reply. I clearly heard Sue's mother reply, "Yes, but they haven't gotten up yet." This is the basis for my assertion. I hurriedly dressed while meditating. Because of the sound of leather shoes, he assumed that the visitor was a woman. It was not surprising. Because high-heeled leather shoes are generally worn by fashionable women, therefore, he assumed that the woman's still young. Of course it makes sense. But he also said that the woman had not slept all night, and he knew that what Eli reported was not a robbery or a disappearance, but a murder. What is the reason for this? Before I could ask him, Hawthorne said to himself, "Bao Lang, don't worry too much about it." Is my conclusion accurate? We won't know until we go downstairs to prove it. Get dressed quickly and don't ask any more unnecessary questions. After washing up, we hurried downstairs. As expected, sitting in the office was a young woman with moderate slender hair, less than 30 years old. Yi's dress was very fashionable. Wearing a pale crimson floral silk jacket, a fashionable black skirt with ruffled edges, a pair of gray stockings, and high-heeled leather shoes with carved purple patterns. As I approached Yi, there was still a scent of fragrance that hit my nostrils. But one look at Yi's appearance. It's surprising. Yi's face was originally shaped like a melon seed, but now the makeup had faded away, her lower cheeks were thin and pale, and her cheekbones became more prominent. A pair of eyes were sunken deeply into their sockets, and their lips had lost their natural appeal. Yi's light black eyes must have been very attractive. At this moment, not only is there no flattery, but it is full of sadness and horror. Hawthorne bowed to Yi and introduced himself. I am Hawthorne. This is Mr. Bao Lang. May I ask your surname? The woman stood up gracefully and greeted us, Mr. Hua, Mr. Bao. My name is Yan Shuiying, and my husband's surname is Zhang. Hawthorne said, Mrs. Zhang, I'm sorry you've waited for a long time. Please sit down. Yi said, I should ask the gentleman for forgiveness. I didn't sleep all night last night. There was fear in my heart again. So as soon as Dongfang turned white, he rushed out. I forgot that it was still early, and I'm very sorry to break the gentleman's dream. Hawthorne said, You're welcome. We were about to get up. Please take a seat. I wanted you to come so early. There must be some terrible trouble. Yes or no? The female guest sat down. Yi's breathing was rapid, and her face became increasingly pale. Yi choked and said, Sir, yes. My husband was murdered. I couldn't help but look at Hawthorne's face. Hawthorne also looked back at me. It was as if he said, I expected Yi to stay up all night, and what he reported was a murder case. Do you admire him now? I understood his hint at a glance. But what kind of supernatural power does he have that enables him to have such foresight? I can't figure it out. Hawthorne then said to the woman, Then please explain clearly the circumstances of my husband's murder. Maybe we can do our best. Yi pressed her mouth with an embroidered white silk scarf, then frowned and said, I don't know the details. Because I went back to my mother's house yesterday. At around 12 o'clock in the evening, Jean Shou, a janitor and gardener, suddenly went to my mother's house to report that the young master had fainted. I was already asleep at that time. As soon as I heard the news, I immediately got up from the bed and came back with Jean Shou. When I got home, I found out that Yu Gang had died. My husband's name was Zhang Yugang. I didn't know how he died, but looking at the chaotic shape of the utensils in the study room, it seemed that he had had a fight with someone, and it was obvious that he was killed by someone. But who is the murderer? We have absolutely no idea. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law Xiaoqin are both girls. Ah Rong, a handyman, happened to go home, and the only man left in the house was Jean Shou, the janitor. Therefore, such a terrible murder occurred in the dark night, and everyone was frightened. What else would you dare to do there? So I waited until the sky turned white before I dared to come here to ask for advice. Mrs. Zhang, where do you live? Number 19, Zhejiang Road. My mum lives in Target Road, Mindlay. This is a murder case, since the location of the crime is in the North District. As usual, you should first report to the North District Police Station. Why did you come to see me directly? Mr. Hua, what you said is right. When I came out, Jean Shou has already gone to the police station to report. I come here to ask you too, it is my personal intention. I couldn't help but interjected. Then your kindness. But the county thought that the plot of this case was a bit bizarre, and the official detectives couldn't understand it. Did you come to ask us for help? This is a reason. But there is another layer, to protect myself. Hawthorne turned his eyes and asked attentively, What do you mean? Who are you afraid of? The woman fixed her eyes and said in a trembling voice, "Yes, Mr. Hua, I'm afraid that people will doubt me." "Hey, who doubts you? For what reason? Are you afraid of people being suspicious?" He pondered for a moment, then raised his head and whispered, "It is my mother-in-law who I am afraid of." After the incident last night, he had already said that it would be difficult to survive. He said that our husband and wife are not always on good terms, which is why things like this happened. He also said that I returned to my mother's house last night, and at night, Yi's son suddenly died tragically. This is all very suspicious. He means. It seems that the death of Yi's son was blamed on the disharmony between the two of us, and it also involved my return to my mother's house. Mr. Hua, how do you think I can afford it? I have long heard of the reputation of these two gentlemen, who are not only able to solve problems for others. He often defends those who are aggrieved. So Hawthorne stopped and said, "Well, I want to ask a question. Your mother-in-law said that you two are not getting along. Is this true?" The words are true. As expected, the relationship between Yu Gang and I was not very good, and we often had quarrels. Why is this so? Our marriage was originally decided by our late father. His name is Yan Yufeng. Have you ever heard of me? Hawthorne hesitated to answer as if he was thinking. I nodded and interjected, "Is it Yan Yufeng who was the governor of Shandong in the former Qing dynasty?" Exactly. He was a very conservative man and never allowed his children to make their own decisions about marriage. Yogang's heir, named Zhang Shixuan, was a comprador in military uniforms and met my third uncle. The third uncle acted as a matchmaker and said how good Yu Gang was, so they became this grudge couple. In fact, Yu Gang was a dandy who always enjoyed traveling, drinking, gambling, and anything else. After getting married, he still did not change his old ways of looking for flowers and asking for help. Sometimes I try to persuade him, but he not only refuses to listen, but also glares at me, often quarreling over this. You imagine this. How can we have peace? Hawthorne pondered for a moment and asked, "Why did you go home yesterday?" It was also because of a quarrel that I went back in anger. Why the quarrel? Yan Shuiying lowered her head again and said regularly, "I often don't go home because of him. I would stay at my mother's house from time to time. But he said that I shouldn't be like this, and his words were insulting. I couldn't bear it anymore, so I started to fight with him." Hawthorne lowered his head and stared at the mat for a while, then raised his gaze slightly. He seemed to steal a glance at the woman, then stood up immediately. He said, "Mrs. Zhang, you go back first. We will be there soon." Zhang Yan looked at both of us, lowered his head and said nothing. Yi's eyes seemed to indicate some fear in her heart. No one dares to go back alone. Hawthorne added, "Mrs. Zhang, please go back with confidence. After we check, the matter will always be clear, and no one will dare to arbitrarily make things difficult for you." Yan Shuiying pressed the embroidered white silk scarf on her lips again, then nodded and stood up. He timidly said, "Then please, gentlemen, come immediately." Hawthorne agreed and sent Yi out. "He'll come back in a moment." He said, "Bao Lang, as far as I know, this is by no means an ordinary thing. You can probably record one more strange case in your diary." "Real?" "I remembered the mystery just now, Hawthorne. What you just expected, he didn't sleep all night, and what he reported was a murder, has been confirmed. But on what basis you based it, I still don't understand. It's obvious. I've said that on my basis." Just the answer that Suma said, yes, but they haven't gotten up yet. If you try to infer Yan's question from this answer, it probably means, can Mr. Hua and Mr. Bao at home? This kind of question would have been very common in the daytime. But at this early dawn, they didn't ask us whether we were up or not, but only asked whether we were at home. It can be seen that there was really no word sleep in Yi's mind. Because he didn't sleep all night, as if it were daytime, he hurriedly asked the question according to Yi's subjective point of view. So I assumed that Yi had not slept all night. I nodded. The reason is indeed good, which shows that Hawthorne's reasoning ability is indeed subtle. I asked again, how do you know that what Eli asked was a murder case? That's based on the first level, which is easier to understand. You think she is a woman. She has not slept all night, and now she comes to us in person. It is obviously a case of high stakes and high stakes. Robbery or disappearance is indeed important, but in the end it is not as serious as murder. This is a reason. There is another level, robbery or disappearance. The time of discovery is probably after people get up in the morning. Since this case happened last night, it took until now to find us. That must be because in the dark night, the woman was overcome by fear and did not dare to go out, so she did not report the crime until dawn. This is clearly a horrifying murder case. If it was a theft or other case, or if it was discovered in the middle of the night, the situation would be different, and the report might have to be made all night long instead of waiting until dawn. After hearing this explanation, I felt secretly impressed. Hawthorne's theories are all based on practical evidence, but the basis he obtained depends on his particularly sharp mind, which is beyond the reach of ordinary people without training. Hawthorne continued, I have asked Sue's mother to prepare breakfast quickly. You should also prepare breakfast quickly. Let's go to Zhang's house together. 2. Facts of the case. Zhang Yogang's residence is in the middle of Qiujiang Road. It is a fairly large Western-style house facing south. There is a short wall of green bricks in front of the door, sandwiched between two iron bars. Enter the door. On the right side is a small concierge. There are two arc-shaped cement truck paths on the left and right, which connect to form a ring and lead directly to the main house. Short hollies are planted on both sides of the car path. Behind the hollies, there is grass and a few miscellaneous trees. In the center is a raised flower bed. There are many grass flowers such as dahlias and daisies scattered here and there, which are blooming in deep purple and red. There is a gravel path on the right side of the house that leads to the back of the house. There seems to be another small garden behind the house. As we walked in, a man came out of the concierge to greet us. Hawthorne glanced at him and asked, Are you Jean Shou? The man was a tall man, about 30 years old, with a pale complexion, thick eyebrows and big eyes, making him appear to be a strong and powerful man. When he heard Hawthorne ask, he stood still for a moment. Exactly, he replied. Gentlemen, that's it. Hawthorne nodded quickly and replied, We were invited by your young mistress. Is Yi in there? Jean Shou said with a smile, Oh, yes, the young lady said it. But the young lady just went out again. Hawthorne said in surprise, Going out again? Where did he go? Yi didn't say. However, I saw that Yi's face was angry when he went out, as if he had had some trouble with his wife. Yi Guan took care of me until a gentleman named Hua and a gentleman named Bao arrived and could be introduced to see my wife. Please. He bent down and invited us in. Hawthorne still stood still, slow down. Is your wife in there alone? I'm talking to the inspectors and gentlemen. How long has it been since the inspector came? More than a quarter of an hour. Together with a detective, he examined the young master's body in the study room for a while. At this moment, the wife and young ladies were being called downstairs and questioned in the sitting room. Then, we don't have to rush in. You gently led us outside the sitting room door so that we could listen so as not to interrupt their conversation. Jean Shou looked at us for a while. He said slowly, "In that case, you only need to stand outside the window of the sitting room to hear it." He pointed with his hand to a window on the west side of the stone steps in front of the main house. Hawthorne nodded and led me along the cement driveway. The left and right sides in front of the main house. Each has a small flower garden, surrounded by a circle of short mountain trees, each forming an oval. There are also pots of frost-proud autumn chrysanthemums on the outer circle of the mountain fan. The pale yellow and tender white fields complement each other, giving it a quiet and elegant style. Our steps were light, but our eyes were focused on the flower beds. The spirit has already flown into the sitting room. It is located on the west side of the house, with 2 windows near the flower garden, both covered with white gauze curtains. I saw a window near the stone steps. Although the curtains inside were lowered, the glass windows outside were completely open. This suits our needs. We crossed the mountain gate, hunched over, quietly walked under the window, and lay down breathlessly. A young woman's voice answered inside. E said, "That's right, I came downstairs first." I could hear many strange sounds downstairs, and I had already harbored ghosts in my heart. Then I heard a sudden thud, as if something heavy fell to the ground, and then there was silence. My brother doesn't go upstairs either. I waited for a while, but there was no sound from them, so I couldn't hold it any longer. My brother is drunk, although he often loses his temper. But this kind of sound has never happened before. So, not wanting to disturb my mother, I quietly walked downstairs holding a foreign candle. I wanted to see if my brother was alone down there, or if someone else had fought with him, and my brother had been knocked down. Because the previous noises really sounded like someone was fighting. Another woman interjected, "Yes. Although we are used to hearing that kind of sound, it is not as scary as last night." Xiao Qin said it was like fighting, which is true. This voice sounds older. A man's voice responded, "Can the old lady hear that voice?" "Well, Miss Zhang, what will happen next?" I walked downstairs and walked gently to the study door. The study door was closed tightly, and there was no light. I leaned my ears to listen, but still couldn't hear any sounds. I became more and more suspicious, and for a while I didn't have the courage to push the study door open. Because my brother's temper is very extreme. Because of my previous 2 experiences, I felt a little scared. But now that I've gone downstairs. But he refused to go up there, still harboring doubts. So after hesitating for a while, I finally gained the courage, gently held the door knob, and pushed the door open an inch. Ouch! Did you see Brother Ling's body then? The girl did not answer immediately. She paused for a while and then replied in a trembling voice. At that time, I looked into the study through the crack in the door, but I felt that it was dark inside and the lights had been completely turned off. I couldn't help but shudder, but I still didn't want to give up. I put the persistent candle through the crack of the door and took a light into the study. Only then did I see a chair lying on the ground near the door. Next to the chair, my brother was lying stiffly. Well, this situation is really terrible. This is another thick man's voice. A man from before asked again, How did you deal with such a fright at that time? I can't remember. I remember shouting something. I won't remember clearly from now on. At this time, the old woman continued. Xiaoqin shouted and then fainted. Wang Ma and I heard the cry and rushed down. Xiaoqin fell outside the study door and dropped the candle on the ground. Fortunately, it was extinguished, but the candle oil stained Yi's body. Old lady, did you go downstairs only after hearing your daughter's call? Yes. I heard Yogang's noise at first, and knew that he went to a friend's house last night to drink wedding wine, got drunk, and went crazy again there. Although I felt his voice was loud and a little suspicious, I never went downstairs. Later, I heard the noise gradually stopped, and just as I was about to go back to sleep, I suddenly heard Xiaoqin yelling from below, so I got up in a hurry, walked to the back room, woke up Wang Ma, and came down with me. At that time Jin Shou also rushed in. We hurriedly lifted Xiaoqin up from the ground, turned on the light in the study, and found that Xiaoqin was lying stiff on the floor. I called him several times, but he didn't answer. Jin Shou touched his mouth and nose, and found that his breath was gone. I was so scared that I lost my mind. Fortunately, Wang Ma and Jin Shou supported me so I didn't faint. Was there anyone else in the study at that time? No. There was only one person lying on the floor. We panicked for a while, but Jin Shou had some ideas. He first asked Wang Ma to send Xiaoqin upstairs. The second time he helped me up. Then he went to Target Road to report the news. Because at that time, Shuiying, my good daughter-in-law, was still comfortably at Yi's mother's house. There was a slight silence in the room. Hawthorne still lowered his head, took out the pamphlet and wrote a few words. He turned his head and tilted his head towards me, as if he could not hear clearly the conversation in my room. I nodded. Then there was another sound coming from the window. The first man asked again, Ms. Zhang, when you heard the sound and went downstairs, do you remember when? This was not noticed. I remember that when my brother came back, we made an appointment and it was only 10 o'clock. The old woman also said, not bad. It was only 9:30 when I went to bed. Later, I was woken up by the sound of you gang banging the table and the chair. It was already past 10:30 on the clock. Miss Zhang, were you still awake when your brother came back? Yes. I was reading a book last night, so I heard it very clearly. How much time was there between when Brother Jean came home and when you came downstairs? I don't pay much attention. About an hour or so. You just said that your brother often goes crazy when he comes home after drinking. Is he like this every day? That's not the case either. He doesn't drink every day. Sometimes he and his friends would have a few drinks and make a scene when they came back. His alcoholism is terrible. When he was noisy, no one dared to approach him. My sister-in-law was beaten several times by him because she tried to persuade him. Last summer and this spring. I also suffered from his losses twice. The first time I came downstairs because he was making a lot of noise. As soon as he saw me, without asking why, he raised his hand and slapped me. The second time he cursed alone. I tried to persuade him and then punched him again. After these 2 times, I just let him make noise. Don't dare go downstairs again. But the sound yesterday was so strange that I took the risk and walked down. The old woman said again, Gentlemen, I will ask you to avenge my son in this matter. Because although Yogang's temper was not very good, he was clearly murdered this time. I have just stated the reason for seeking death, and I doubt you gentlemen will understand it. There is a difference in life. Without solid evidence, you cannot just say who did it. Evidence or not, it's all up to the gentleman to find it. If we say that the situation in the inside story is already very obvious. Not to mention anything else, but last night, Shuang and Yu Gang had a big fight before going back to her parents' house. Well, I already know this. Old lady, didn't you just say that my wife's brother is called Yan Shaoshan and he was a county governor? Yes. Just because the Yi family is an official, Yi Kai pretends to be dignified and looks down on her mother-in-law and husband. In fact, Yi Zhen is a white tiger star, who defeated Yi's grandpa as soon as he entered the door. This time Yi was cruel enough to do something like this. The girl interrupted again, Mom, don't say that. Whether the sister-in-law is related to this matter or not remains to be found out. You keep saying that it must be Yi. If the Yen family hears it, isn't it going to cause trouble? The man also echoed, yes. We cannot judge first. Who is the murderer? It's not too late to wait until we find out. Now let me ask one more question. What was the reason for the quarrel between the couple yesterday? The old woman said, ouch. It's embarrassing to say it. Xiang has been acting more and more wrong recently. Whenever Gang is not at home, he goes out freely. Of course I don't need to explain the situation here. But when you just happened to say a few words to Yi started to curse each other, making a big fuss. Not only that, although Yi himself did not know how to restrain himself, when he heard that someone was about to take a concubine, he would show his full strength and oppose it with all his strength. As the saying goes, raising a hen will lay eggs. A woman has been married for 3 years. She has no future and is not a woman, but she relies on the power of her mother's family to look down on us. Mr. Detective, do you want to make people angry or hateful? So, your son once wanted to take a concubine. Just as I was hearing this, I suddenly felt a tiny flying insect fly into my nostrils. When the nerves in the nostrils are stimulated, they can't help but sneeze. This unintentional sneeze actually startled the people in the sitting room, and the conversation inside immediately stopped. 3. In the corpse room. I was embarrassed that an unintentional sneeze had caused this. Hawthorne also knew that the matter was at a standstill and could no longer eavesdrop. He frowned at me and without saying a word, he stood up straight, strode up the stone steps of the main room and walked in. I followed behind in frustration. In the middle of the main room is a living room, lined with a group of sofa seats covered with purple silk. There was a gray-white carpet on the floor. There is a mahogany half-table against the wall, with many ancient porcelain and antiques, and the furnishings are very rich. This living room is very large and seems not to be used except for special banquets. At that time, the door of the sitting room opened, and a middle-aged man wearing a chestnut-colored tweed jacket walked out. Hawthorne would have known him. They nodded to each other. Behind us was a short, fat man wearing a robe and a short beard, but he didn't recognize Hawthorne and just looked at us. Later I learned that the person who greeted Hawthorne was Yao Guiying, the chief detective of the North District Police Station, who was the one who conducted the interview in the room earlier. He has solved several robberies recently and has a good reputation. And that short fat man is Wang Xinyan, the inspector of this district. The loud voice we heard outside the window was that of the inspector. Yao Guiying introduced Inspector Jiang to us for a few words. Then they walked into the sitting room together. There were 2 women inside, one old and one young, who were the mother and sister of the deceased Zhang Yugang. The attire is all plain. The old man was 56 or 17 years old. His forehead was full of wrinkles, his complexion was rough and yellow, but his eyes were round, black and majestic. The girl was about 24 or 5 years old, with an egg-shaped face and lively eyes, but her face was so white that there was no blood. He wears a thin cotton-padded jacket made of gray and blue plain silk, a black skirt suit, and blue satin embroidered shoes on her feet. At this time, Yi's left hand was holding a white towel, rubbing Yi's eyes. The mother and daughter sat facing each other, looking relatively miserable, both obviously controlled by the god of sorrow. There was an old woman in her 50s standing next to her, her head lowered as if her teeth were chattering, which further contributed to the gloomy and terrifying atmosphere in the room. Hawthorne bowed respectfully and said to the old woman, "Mrs. Zhang, we were invited by your daughter-in-law, Ms. Yan Jiaying. However, our duty is to avenge the grievances of the deceased and seek justice from conscience and law. Justice does not come from defending anyone. Please don't misunderstand this." The old woman glared at Hawthorne, with obvious hostility in her eyes. Hawthorne pretended not to see it, and did not meet Yi's eyes. The old woman said slowly, "Sir, it would be great if you avenge Yugang. Let me tell you, Yugang is the son of my second wife. He is 28 years old and is the son-in-law of my second wife, Zhang. He has been begging for a wife for 3 years, but my good wife has not given him a son yet. This time he suffered such a tragic death, and my family, Zhang, has no heirs. If you can avenge him, Zhang's ancestors will also be grateful." Hawthorne frowned, nodded slightly, turned back to Yao Guiying and said, "I have roughly listened to a few words of your conversation just now. I did this just to save trouble. Please forgive me. Now I want to see the body first. Haven't you already experienced it?" "Yes, I tested it with Inspector Yao. According to my opinion, Zhang Yugang must have been killed by others." After listening to his words, I felt secretly amused. I know I have a weakness for speaking quickly. Hawthorne often said that I was almost reckless. Now Inspector Zhang's reckless qualifications seemed to be one level higher than mine. Hawthorne looked normal and replied leisurely, "Oh, were you really killed? Did you get the murder weapon?" "No. But it looks like from the scars on his chest. Apparently he was killed by a sharp knife. Then this one is a murder. Yes or no?" Certainly. We searched for a long time but couldn't find the murder weapon. With this move, it is obvious that he was killed. Good. Let's take a look and then talk." The fat man enthusiastically led him out of the sitting room first. Passed through the living room and opened the study door on the east side. Impatient and quick-tongued can indeed be used as a testimonial for this Mr. Inspector. When Yao Guiying asked questions, he was not involved. I only heard him speak once, but he had been left out for a long time. Now he met us. He clearly wanted to take the opportunity to vent and show off. Hawthorne deliberately perfunctory him again, and he became more and more proud and energetic. There was a messy and terrifying scene in the study room. 2 or 3 steps away from the door, there was the body of Yugang lying sideways, with its head east and feet west. He wears a light brown serge jacket, a plain woolen mandarin jacket, a pair of light brown Chinese silk trousers, silk stockings, and pure brocade shoes, all new and of particularly elegant style. At this time, not only had the buttons on his chest been untied, the clothes on his lower body were also wrinkled and uneven, as if he had rolled and twisted on the ground before he died. Next to the body were an overturned oak chair and a carved coffee table. There was also a broken vase, the water from the bottle was spilled all over the floor, and the traces were still clearly visible. The end of the body's head points towards the first window facing the garden. One window was still open, but the sliver curtains of white gauze drooped heavily. The utensils in the room are all very exquisite and luxurious, and most of them are imported. However, the impression they gave me was that they were vulgar and messy. I was looking around, and Hawthorne had taken out his magnifying glass, crouched down and examined it carefully. His face was very solemn, and his eyes were full of curiosity, which seemed to imply that this case was really intriguing. The dead man's complexion was gray with a hint of blue. The eyes were wide open, hideous and terrifying. The green and black lips were curled up, revealing a row of pale teeth, with 2 gold threads embedded in the gaps between the teeth. Seeing this shape in the daytime is enough to make one's hair stand on end, let alone in the silence of a cold night. Hawthorne raised his head and shouted, "Inspector Yao, Inspector Wang, please take a look. Isn't this scar very strange?" When I leaned over to take a look, I saw that the scar was on the left side of the chest. There was a small pile of blood stains on the white shirt, but the blood was very light. Yao Guiying replied, "It's really strange. We just took a brief look at it and haven't examined it carefully yet. Mr. Hua, do you have any advice?" Hawthorne pointed to the wound and said, "Look." The wound was indeed caused by a sharp knife, but the wound was even and there were no blood marks around it. Therefore, I feel that this knife cannot be said to be a fatal injury. The pudgy Inspector Wang opened his eyes wide, frowned, and clasped his hands together, as if this was a surprise to him. Yao Guiying also said suspiciously, "Are you saying there are also fatal injuries?" Hawthorne first pointed to the lips and nostrils of the deceased, and then pointed to the muscles around the wound, and said, "There is a special color here. Can you see it? Everyone I have seen is blue and black." "Mr. Hua, you said he was." Hua Sang didn't wait for Yao Guiying to continue, and then said, "Exactly, this is clearly a sign of poisoning. Have you ever called a doctor?" Yao Guiying replied, "When we came out of the hall, we had already called to ask for Dr. Su, who will probably be here soon." Inspector Wang's smug demeanor changed. He was stunned and said, "This is so strange. He was also poisoned? If so, wouldn't it be a double murder?" I also felt a shiver. A heavy murder still feels so dark that it is difficult to start. If it is indeed a double murder, wouldn't it be even more complicated because the secret behind it is complicated? Hawthorne looked at me sideways and said vaguely, "I had expected this to be a very mysterious case, but now it has unfortunately become a fact." He turned back to Yao Guiying and said, "What was the original condition of the buttons on the deceased's mantle? Is it open or closed?" Inspector Yao said, "The buttons are originally buttoned one by one. But at that time, the knife-edge marks on the Mandarin jacket were so thin that they were almost invisible at a glance. After we discovered it, we unbuttoned it to check it." "When you unbuttoned, were there any blood stains on your fingers?" "No. My fingers are clean." "Well, look. The 2 buttons were still stained with some blood. But the blood stains were not directly contaminated, but were indirectly transferred from the fingers. However, the mark is very small and requires a magnifying glass to see it." Hawthorne stood up and handed the magnifying glass to Yao Guiying. Yao Guiying took it and leaned down to take a look. After a while, he stood up and nodded. He said, "Exactly. This can be seen after the murderer committed the crime." The clothes buttons of the deceased were touched. Hawthorne pondered for a moment and responded, "Not bad." You tentatively felt around in the mantle bag, but there was something else. I think that the reason why the man unbuttoned his clothes must be to search for something on the deceased. Yao Guiying unbuttoned his mantle and reached into his bag to fumble. After a while, he took out a small gold watch and a key. He even dug into his robe pocket, but found only a white towel and a silver cigarette case. Hawthorne took the watch. He opened the cover, took a look, and said, "Oh, this watch is still running. Where is this key?" He kept looking around the room. Inspector Wang said, "Well, isn't there an iron box at the window over there? Is this key the one on the iron box?" He pointed to a window. Hawthorne was also walking towards the iron box. As he walked, he responded, "Maybe it is. Let's try it for a while." He threw the key into the keyhole of the iron box, and it matched. He opened the door of the box and looked into the box for a while, but was suddenly disappointed again. The iron box is empty. He lowered his head and thought about it again, and then said, "Although, this situation can also give us a revelation." Yao Guiying asked, "How is it? Do you think the murderer's purpose is to make money?" Hawthorne said, "We don't have to say that the murderer's purpose is to make money. But at least there was always some theft." Inspector Wang seemed unable to bear it again. If property is not the murderer's main purpose, then what purpose did that person have to commit the murder? Hawthorne didn't seem to hear it and came over to get the magnifying glass. Returned to the iron box again. Yao Guiying stood beside him, rolled his eyes at Inspector Wang and remained silent. I took the opportunity to look around the room. This study room is the same size and location as the sitting room just now, but the sitting room is located to the west of the guest room, and the study room is located to the east of the guest room. On the south side facing the garden, there are two identical windows. Between the first window and the door leading to the living room lay the body. The iron box was placed between the first window and the second window against the wall. Take a step further east from the iron box. It is the window of the second window. There was a mahogany desk placed by the window, the curtains were lowered, and the glass windows were tightly closed. The window on the east side was also closed. I was looking around when I suddenly heard Hawthorne exclaim, which made me turn around. Hawthorne said, "Brother Guiying, I thought there must be some property in this iron box, but someone took the opportunity to steal it." Really? Where did you see this layer?" Hawthorne pointed to the door of the iron box and said, "Look, isn't this the mark that someone wiped the door with something?" Yao Guiying nodded and said, "Good. The murderer probably wiped it deliberately to eliminate the fingerprints." "Yeah. Exactly. I was trying to find some fingerprints, but unexpectedly, the man was an experienced hand and wiped them clean in advance. In this way, the murderer is an experienced guy." Hawthorne responded, "Yes, he is a sophisticated and wise man. We cannot underestimate it." He then pointed to the inside of the iron box and said, "Look at the marks on the board of this box. It seems that what the deceased kept was not silver, but banknotes. Look, there is a thin layer of dust on the box board. Aren't there a few random lines scratched by fingertips there?" Inspector Wang added condolences. "Then how much was stolen?" Hawthorne shook his head. "I can't answer this question. I'll stop for a while and ask the deceased's mother." He closed the door of the iron box and said to Yao Guiying, look at this trace. It seems that the man stabbed Yu Gang, then unbuttoned his clothes, took out the key, opened the iron box, took out all the banknotes in the box, and then locked the iron box and left the key in his pocket. And finally buttoned it up. From this, one can imagine the man's calmness. After the incident was over, the man was able to wipe the fingerprints on the door of the box clean, which further showed that the man handled the matter in a calm and thorough manner. Yao Guiying nodded and said, "Mr. Hua, your opinion is really good." So I got another confirmation. Look, didn't the right corner of the curtain on the first window have a corner cut off? My eyes followed Yao Guiying's fingers to the curtain. Indeed, a sharp corner had been cut off from the lower right corner of the curtain. It's about 2 to 3 inches wide. Hawthorne shrugged and said, "Hey, Brother Guiying, your observation skills are really good." He turned around and walked to the first window. I had seen the cut marks on the curtains just now and thought they were accidental. But now, I see that my previous opinion was wrong. He took out the magnifying glass again, leaned over and examined the corners of the curtains carefully. After a while, he added, "The corners of this curtain were indeed recently cut with scissors." The cut white gauze was wide at the bottom and pointed at the top, exactly forming a triangle. When I saw it, it was cut. The sharp edges of the scissors clearly come from the bottom up. Very strange. Brother Guiying, when you talk about confirmation, do you mean the elimination of fingerprints? Yes. The man's blood-stained fingers must have lifted the curtain before, and then he noticed it and cut it off with scissors. Mr. Hua, do you think so? Hawthorne pondered for a moment and nodded, yes. The purpose of this layer is of course the same as wiping on the surface of the iron box. Hey, this man is so attentive. He stroked his chin with his right hand. With his chin and eyes constantly moving in all directions, he asked slowly, "Have you ever seen the corner of the cut gauze curtain?" Yao Guiying shook his head and said, "Shajiao, I didn't see it." He raised his hand and pointed at the desk. "I've seen the scissors before. Isn't that a small pair of scissors over there?" Snort. Hawthorne's hum interrupted the end of Yao Guiying's words. It turned out that his eyes had already shot to the writing desk, as if he had accidentally seen some important evidence. 4. Check can. Amid the astonishment of the three people, Hawthorne's quick steps had already reached the writing desk in a blink of an eye. The three of us hurriedly followed. Hawthorne pressed one hand on the back of the chair in front of the desk and stared at the desk with sharp eyes. I didn't know what he saw for a while, and I secretly wondered. Because the small pair of small pointed scissors that Yao Guiying mentioned were clearly on the left side of the desk, but what Hawthorne paid attention to did not seem to be on the scissors. I looked carefully at the things on the desk. There is a square of absorbent paper in the center of the table, with the four corners wrapped in black leather. There is a writing brush on the paper board. One end of the brush is resting on the inkstone. There is still water in the inkstone pool. On the left side of the table are a Western-style golden flower teapot and a gold-rimmed white porcelain teacup, as well as several pieces of newsprint and several novels. I don't think there's anything special. I don't know why Hawthorne opened his eyes wide and looked so trance-like. After a while, Hawthorne suddenly turned around. Brother Guiying, have you ever seen this table? Yao Guiying replied calmly, I saw it once, but I didn't look carefully. Then take a closer look. Is there anything I should pay attention to? Hawthorne turned back to me and said, Bao Lang, come and take a look. This is a great opportunity to experiment with your powers of observation. I peeked at Yao Guiying, biting her lip, frowning, looking embarrassed. It was obvious that he was completely unsure of Hawthorne's words. I also looked at the desk carefully again, trying my best to catch my breath. But there was really nothing special on the table that caught my eye, in addition to the few things just described. There is also a white porcelain pen holder, a yellow pen cover, a purple water basin, most of the hexagonal pine smoke ink, and a white copper paperweight with seal characters engraved on it. These are the supplies that should be on the desk. Which one does Hawthorne think should be paid attention to? Could it be that Hawthorne's eyes could see through the wooden board and see what was inside the table? Yao Guiying said, I saw that the pen was resting on the inkstone, and the pen cover was removed. There was still water in the inkstone pool, which showed that someone had written. Mr. Hua. Is this what you said you should pay attention to? Good. This is just one point, there is a more important point. I used my eyesight again. My eyes moved from the brush to the inked paper. When I looked carefully, I couldn't help but scream. I said, Hawthorne. I can see it. The absorbent paper on this paper board is indeed pure white at first glance, but in fact there is a dividing line in the middle, half is snow white and new, and the other half is slightly gray, showing that it has been dusted for several days. It was clear that half of the old absorbent paper on top had been torn off, leaving only half of it. Hawthorne suddenly said loudly, Bao Lang, your observation skills have really improved amazingly. From now on, I am not afraid of not having a capable assistant. I don't know how to answer. On the contrary, I felt a little embarrassed. Hawthorne said to Yao Guiying again, Brother Guiying, do you understand? Look at this situation, it seems that someone has written here. After writing, he printed it on this absorbent paper. In this way, the handwriting leave on absorbent paper of course. Later, half of the piece of absorbent paper on top was torn off because of the writing on it, so the new layer of absorbent paper underneath was exposed. But the floor above is not very old. The color difference between the old and new ones is so slight that it is not easy to notice at a glance. Yao Guiying blushed for a while and said, I have seen whether the absorbent paper is old or new. But my stupid mind didn't think it was useful at the moment, so I didn't pay attention. Mr. Hua, who do you think tore this absorbent paper? Go. Although this is still a question, it is based on common sense. The purpose of tearing the paper must be to keep some ulterior secret. So rather than saying that it was torn by the deceased himself, it would be more affectionate to say that the assassin tore it off. Although the absorbent paper has been torn off by the murderer. Did the original piece of paper also fall into the hands of the murderer? Yes, judging by the current situation, it has probably been taken away by that person. But we haven't checked it carefully, so we can't say for sure. Inspector Wang couldn't help but say, but that original piece of paper was written by the deceased? What is the nature of what is written? Mr. Hua, do you also know? I have no idea. We must first find out the deceased's daily activities and his occupation before we can make any inferences. Yao Guiying said, Zhang Yugang has quite a legacy. According to his mother. He works as a clerk in Xinshin Flour Company. Hawthorne nodded and picked up a few newspapers from the desk. This is yesterday's news. Alas, there are also 2 small newspapers dedicated to drama and flower world news. This can give you an idea of his daily life. The newspaper was picked up, and there was a small pink piece of paper underneath. Hawthorne quickly picked up the small note and said, a new style of invitation. I will read it to you, on November 3rd of the Gregorian calendar, the wedding ceremony of my son Bo Xiong and Ms. Meng Fengfeng will be held at our house. That evening. Jingji happy feast. Looking forward to visiting you. The Qian family bowed. The banquet will be at our home, number 5 Yongla Lane, Hangkou Road. Hawthorne finished reading and thought for a moment. Brother Guiying, when you asked me just now, didn't Mrs. Zhang say that Yi's son had a wedding banquet last night? Yes, today is the 4th. He must have been enjoying the Qian family's wedding wine yesterday. Looking at it this way, it may fit your view of poisoning. This invitation is indeed of great value. I secretly wondered whether Congo was really poisoned. If so, and with the conclusive evidence of the murder, it was clearly a double murder. So what? Were these 2 murders committed by one person? Or were there 2 murderers? If it was a murderer and he had already been poisoned, why would he want to stab him again? If there are 2 murderers, then there will be many doubts and it will be even more difficult to solve. Is Hawthorne competent for this case? Maybe. Hawthorne seemed to be straining his sense of smell. He lowered his head and looked at the desk. He shouted, he even vomited. This spittoon is the stuff he vomited. Do you think it? A spittoon is an abominable vessel. I didn't want to look at it, but because of Hawthorne's indirect suggestion, an unpleasant smell of sour wine rushed into my nostrils. Yao Guiying said, there is another kind of confirmation for the idea of poisoning. Hawthorne raised his head, looked out the window, and shouted, Brother Guiying. There is a car. It's probably Su Jiren, the medical officer in your hall, who is here. Yao Guiying responded and hurried out to greet him. After a while, he led a short middle-aged man in a suit. After greeting each other, they went to the corpse to inspect it. Medical officer Su put down a leather bag he had brought with him and crouched down to examine the body. After a while, he slowly stood up straight. Yao Guiying briefly stated to him the opinions he had just discussed with Hawthorne. Medical officer Su said, judging from the appearance, 8 out of 10 times this person has signs of poisoning. But what exactly will happen can only be determined after the prosecutor arrives and undergoes careful examination. Hawthorne said, I have to ask Mr. Su to prove a doubt. If the deceased was poisoned, was it fatal due to poison? Still killed by a sharp knife, I want your advice on this point. Mr. Hua, you're too polite. After I test it, I will report the results to you. The medical officer stood up straight and looked around the study room, as if he was looking for something. Hawthorne asked, Is Mr. Su looking for some inspection materials? Yes. Anyone who is checking for poisoning must also collect some drinks, food and utensils such as teapots and glasses, so that the source of the poison can be traced. I have already found one for you. Here it is. Hawthorne said with a smile, leading him to the desk and pointing to the brass spittoon. The medical officer said, Oh, he had vomited it. This is really important and should be taken back. He turned around, saw the teapot on the desk, and casually opened the lid of the teapot. This is still a full pot of tea. Probably black tea. Hawthorne and I also stretched our heads to take a look. I took a closer look at the thick layer of floating tea leaves, and it turned out to be black tea. The medical officer added, No matter what, I have to bring some for examination. Dr. Su took out a small glass bottle from his pocket, then picked up the teapot, poured half a cup into the teacup, and then put it into the glass bottle from the teacup. Then he corked the glass bottle tightly and put it into the bag. He said, Inspector Yao, I will go back and report first. so that the prosecutor can come earlier and I can help you with the inspection. Please send a brother to take this spittoon back to the office. I will let you know what the results of the inspection are like." Yao Guiying responded, "Very good. I'm waiting for your message." Dr. Su took the leather bag and turned to go out. Hawthorne suddenly stopped him. "Mr. Su, I'm sorry. One more thing, if there is anything we need to pay attention to on the body, please let us know. We only took a look at his outside and haven't examined it carefully yet." 5. Division of Labor. After Medical Officer Su Jiren left, Hawthorne suggested that the four of us work separately. Yao Guiying went to ask the deceased's mother again, and asked 4 questions. 1. How much money was stored in Yi's son's silver box? 2. Yi said that the deceased had the intention of taking a concubine. What exactly is the situation? 3. How many friends does Yi's son have the most familiar with? 4. After the murder was discovered, Jin Shou immediately went to target Lian's house to report the news. Where were the mother and daughter and the maid Wang Ma waiting at that time? And are there other guards in the library and the door? Hawthorne himself was responsible for going to the concierge to inquire about Jin Shou. Because according to his opinion, Jin Shou actually plays an important role in this case. Inspector Wang and I were responsible for carefully checking the inside and outside of the house in order to find some clues or discover the whereabouts of the murderer. After the discussion was settled, the 4 people immediately split up to work. I waited for Hua Sang and Yao Guiying to go out, and then we had another break with Inspector Wang Xinyan. Inspector Wang went to look at the outside of the house, while I searched the corpse room. Inspector Wang agreed and went out, and I started to do it in the room. Although the floor in the corpse room was painted, there were so many footprints that it was impossible to distinguish them clearly. I looked carefully at the corner of the wall for a while, but there was nothing suspicious. The corners of yarn cut off from my ideal curtain, the ink-stained paper torn off, the murderous knife, etc. There is no trace. I looked at the 3 windows again. The first window facing south is open, and the curtains are cut off, as I have already said. The second window in front of the desk is bolted tightly, leaving no trace, and the third window faces, although the east window is closed. But it is closed and there is no bolt. Could this window have been the entrance and exit of the murderer? But upon closer inspection, I laughed at myself for my recklessness. This window is along the passage, and its equipment is different from the 2 windows facing south. There were iron bars across the glass window, so of course the murderer couldn't get in or out. I opened the window and touched the iron bars, but they couldn't shake at all. I raised my head and took a look. There was a small alley outside the window, and there was a white brick wall opposite the window. Inside the wall seemed to be someone's patio. In any case, this window must not be regarded as a passage. There is no room for development in the 3 windows, so I will focus on the desk again. Hawthorne and others have already experienced the things on the table, so there is no need for me to study them further. I opened a drawer on the left side of the desk and rummaged through it for a while, but there was nothing important. He reached out to open the one on the right, but it was locked. At this time, it is not free to find the key to open it, and it is not easy to do. Because the key to the drawer may be on the deceased's body, Hawthorne could not search without permission because the prosecutor was not present. Naturally, it is even more inconvenient for me to turn over a dead body. So I took it out and used a knife to pick the lock of the drawer. Without much effort, the drawer was pried open, revealing a bank book and several popular so-called erotic novels. In addition, there are many horse racing tickets and photos of various sizes. The photos are all of girls in fashionable clothes. I took out the novel and flipped through it, and suddenly I saw another photo wrapped in transparent paper in the book. There is also a woman in the photo, less than 20 years old. She is dressed like a Zyajia and looks pretty good. I secretly thought that since I attached so much importance to this photo, it must be related. I also found a piece of Chinese-style Haiyu letterhead in another book, with a few lines of cursive calligraphy written on it. I quickly took out the letter and read. It is very presumptuous of me to write this letter to you. But you and I are both in the business world, and you are very respectable, so I specially inform you. Your wife's behavior seems not to be very serious lately. She is often seen in dance halls and game fields. Last night, I saw E and a man watching a show at the Taiwan Theater together. This is what I saw. You should pay more attention. If it is released again, then. The letter suddenly stopped here. The handwriting on the letter was very cursory, and 2 words had been altered. I couldn't think of the purpose of that letter at the moment. Is it a draft? Or a recorded copy? Who wrote it again? Is the lady mentioned in the letter the deceased Yu Gang's wife? Or have you just addressed someone else? When I was daydreaming. Suddenly I heard Inspector Jiang greeting me outside the window. Mr. Bao, please come out and take a look. There is an important evidence here. His report was quite solemn, and he probably had discovered something. I hurriedly took the photos and letters and walked outside, and saw Inspector Wang outside the first window. His surprised eyes were fixed on the grass below the window. He twirled his short beard and said proudly, Mr. Bao, look, isn't this half a footprint? When I took a closer look, I saw that there was indeed a very deep footprint. I said, exactly, this discovery is very important. Well, these are the footprints of a man. It looks like a man standing on tiptoes, peering into the window, so the weight of his whole body is leaning on his toes, and the prints are very deep. Inspector Wang became more and more proud and nodded repeatedly, expressing his agreement with my opinion. He also assumed that the footprints were those left by the murderer. I didn't dare to agree with this point, but I told him the photos and letter paper I found. He was also very pleasantly surprised, thinking that these were the necessary evidence to solve the case. At this time our task is basically completed. Let's go find Hawthorne together. Hawthorne was still questioning Jean Shou in the concierge. It was inconvenient for me to go in and disturb him, so I grabbed Inspector Wang and stood outside the door together, listening to the conversation inside. Hawthorne asked, You said that your master seems to be afraid of someone. But last night, there was such an expression? Jean Shou said, No. It's been like this for 3 or 4 weeks. But he came back very early last night and carefully told me to close the front and back doors. His fearful state felt more exposed. You said that after he came back, he walked into the study. How do you know? While I was locking the door, I saw the light in the study room turn on. In fact, he does this every night. After coming back, he always reads the newspaper in the study for a while before going to bed. Which side is his bedroom on? But on the upper floor of the main house? No. The middle floor is the wife's bedroom. The west building is the lady's room. The young master's room is upstairs in the study on the east side. Did he go upstairs last night? I have no idea. I closed the door and went back in to sleep. Have you ever heard any sounds while sleeping? What you can hear is the young master's voice. What's the sound like? At first there were just some slaps on the table and curse words, but later it seemed like they were shouting. Who can you hear scolding? I didn't hear clearly. But the young master often scolds others alone. The scolding was very rough and vicious, and I couldn't learn to say it. The room suddenly fell silent. Inspector Wang nodded to me, indicating that he was happy that these words had made progress on the case. I replied to him in the same way, still standing breathlessly. After a while, the voice in the concierge continued. Hawthorne said, Jean Shou, you should tell the truth. I can see from your face that you are hiding something from me. If so, you will not only mislead others, but also mislead yourself. Jean Shochi said, I also heard a shout, as if the young master, he had called me. Hey, how are you? Have you ever promised him? No. I was already asleep in bed. What? The master called you, why didn't you agree? Another moment of silence. The air in the concierge must have been tense at this time. Wang Ximian and I still faced each other in silence. Hawthorne said, Tell me. You clearly know that your master is being murdered, so you can't be afraid? Otherwise, you are too lazy. Jean Shou's thick voice suddenly seemed to be trembling. Sir, no, it's not that I'm lazy. I. Huh. What is it but laziness? Why are you hesitating? Sir, there is a reason. The young master often behaves like this after drinking. Once, he yelled and cursed in the study and broke a piece of glass and a teapot. I was startled and ran in to take a look. It turned out that he was drunk and crazy there alone. I punched him. I was scared, so I didn't dare to go in casually last night. Later, I was about to fall asleep, and suddenly I heard the young lady's call, so I got up and ran in. The young master has fallen to the ground. You will know then that your master has been killed. Kill or not, I don't think so. I just walked closer and touched him, and I felt that his breathing had stopped. We were so panicked that we had no choice. Later I asked Ma Wang to send the young lady and ladies upstairs. Then I went to the young lattice house to report the news. But at that time, my wife told me not to explain clearly, but to say that the young master was drunk. When you went to report the news, did you go out through this gate? Yes. How is the gate after you go out? Is there someone to watch over you? No. I just kept the door ajar. I just told my husband that Kuelin, the coachman, resigned last month, and Aaron, the handyman, went home yesterday evening because his mother was ill, so there was no one to take my place. What will happen to the gate when you come back? Still hiding it, no different. Hawthorne paused for a moment, then asked, When did your master come back last night? When did the crime happen? I only remember that it was around 10 o'clock when the young master came back. Later, I went to the young mistress's house to report the news, but I didn't pay attention to the time. But it was already 12 o'clock when I left the young lady's house and returned. The question and answer paused. I heard Hawthorne tapping his fingers on the table in the concierge. The lingering power of the autumn sun was not weak yet. I was soaked in its solution and felt a little hot. Wang Ximian was also wiping his plump forehead with a handkerchief. After a while, Hawthorne changed the topic again. Your master must have a lot of friends, right? Jean Shou replied without hesitation, Yes, there are quite a few. In the past, Master Jiang often came and went here. There were also Masters Yu and Master Zheng. There is also a girl named Xiao Ma, a girl named Lao Lu, and a female actor named Xiao Jinhua. Hawthorne said, "Oh, a female actor? Yi Chang comes here?" "Yes, but these people have stopped coming recently. There has been literally no one coming to the door in recent weeks. So in the past few weeks. Have you ever seen any suspicious people walking in front of your house?" This it's hard to say. If a traveler visits you at the door. That happens from time to time. What I mean is, you want to know if there is anyone hanging around or asking you about your tone. Jean Shou paused for a moment, as if he was thinking about something, and then replied, "Well, I remember the day before yesterday, in the afternoon, a man came in and asked me if the young master was at home. I answered that he was not there. He also asked when the young master would come back, and I said not sure. Probably always in the middle of the night." The man seemed unhappy. Hawthorne's tone seemed to be more attentive. "How does that person dress? Do you recognize it?" "No, I haven't seen it before. The clothes were mid-range clothes. I can't remember clearly. I think that man wears a pair of convex glasses, so he doesn't look like a dirty person." "Did you tell your master afterwards?" "No. Because I didn't care at the time and forgot about it later." "Then you will always be in this concierge during the day? Or do you always have to walk away?" "No, I've been here all the time. Only when I'm eating, I go inside to the kitchen to carry the food. But there isn't much time. In addition, unless there are guests coming, I go in to announce and leave the concierge temporarily." "Were there any visitors who asked you to report inside yesterday afternoon?" "No, well, there is." "What?" "At 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, a tall man in a suit came to ask if the young master was there. I didn't inform him." "Why? Is your master not at home?" "No, the young master is at home, but I heard him arguing with the young grandma. I was a little scared, so I answered that the guest was not at home and did not go in to inform him." "You didn't tell your master later?" "No, I'm really afraid of him." "Do you know this guest?" "I don't know him, but I saw him once. He visited the young master last week, and the young master went out with him. I don't know his last name or his name." "Were there any other guests yesterday?" There is none left. But during dinner, I went to the kitchen as usual." "Is your master at home at that time?" "Not here. He went out again. I heard that your mistress had a quarrel with your master in the evening. Why wasn't she there?" "The quarrel was after 4 o'clock. The young master came back at 4 o'clock, and for some reason he started to quarrel with the young mistress again. After a quarrel, he hurried out again. Then, the young lady also went back to Yi's mother's house. So when it was dark, the young master was not at home. Do you know where your master went at that time?" "I know. My wife said the day before that the young master was going to have a wedding banquet at Qian's house on Hangkou Road last night. He also wore new clothes when he went out. But when your master comes back in the evening, do you know whether he has indeed had a wedding banquet?" "Yes, he did drink. Because when he told me to close the front and back doors, I felt the smell of alcohol coming out of his mouth." Hawthorne paused and said, "Okay. Now you guard the gate well. I'll ask you later if I have anything else." When Hawthorne walked out of the porter's room, Inspector Wang straightened his back and walked closer, nodding in greeting. He clearly believed that the footprints he found played an important role in the whole case, so he couldn't wait to report the results he found to Hawthorne. But it didn't happen by chance. At this time, Yao Guiying also hurriedly came out. As soon as he saw Hawthorne, he spoke first and told the results of his questioning. He has already asked the mother of the deceased. It is said that Yu Gang has many friends but few enemies. If you want to be more careful, you can ask friends in the flower company. Although the matter of taking concubines was discussed once, it failed due to the opposition of his wife's uncle, Yan Shaoshan, who was the county magistrate, and the obstruction of his wife, Yan Jiaying. After the crime happened last night, Zhang's mother and Shao Qin went upstairs. They were both frightened and went back to their rooms. It wasn't until Jin Shou brought Yan Shuiying back that mother and daughter went downstairs with Wang Ma. As for the amount of money in the iron box, his mother had no idea. Because when Yougang's heir, Zhang Shixuan, was dying, except for part of Zhang's mother's pension, the inheritance has been divided equally between the two siblings. Therefore, he was the only one in charge of the property that was just his share, and no one in his family knew the details. After listening to Yao Guiying's words, Hua Sang said, "Then, the amount of money cannot be asked here." I didn't mean to compete with Wang Xinyan first, but the topic of the conversation was related to my mission, so I once again deprived him of the opportunity to speak. I interjected, "I know. At least $1,500. Wang Xinyan rolled his eyes at me. Yao Guiying also raised his surprised eyes and stared at me blankly. Hawthorne immediately asked, "Bao Lang, what evidence did you find?" "Yes. I found a bank book. He withdrew 1,500 yuan from Hujiang Bank yesterday. I took out all the passbooks, photos, letters and other items I got from the desk drawer and showed them to Hawthorne and Yao Guiying. They both admit that photos and letterhead are very important." Yao Guiying collected the evidence. Inspector Wang Xinyan was very anxious at this moment. After he couldn't bear it anymore, he finally refused to remain silent. He said loudly, "There are still footprints of a murderer over there." His report was delivered in a solemn manner. Although Yao Guiying was surprised for a moment, Hawthorne only nodded lightly. He seemed unfazed. On the contrary, I felt a little embarrassed for Inspector Wang. Hawthorne turned around and replied, "Isn't that footprint outside the first window of the crime room? I saw this just now." "Yes, it is indeed very important." But Mr. Wang recognized it as the murderer. Footprints. If there is no other proof, it seems too early. Naturally, this criticism would greatly disappoint the fat man. But it was Hawthorne who saved his embarrassment of blinking alternately and stuttering. He said, "Okay. Let's go back and sit down. Discuss a way to start detecting the murderer." 6. Double murder. After we exchanged the results with each other in the living room and discussed it for a while, we assumed that this was a complicated and mysterious murder case, and it was a double murder. One is poisoning. One is stabbing. There are two murderers, and their motives may be different. According to Hawthorne's independent opinion, Yu Gang was not only poisoned, but also died from the poison. For legal support, he asked Medical Officer Su Jiren to pay special attention to this point. As for the reason why he was just killed. As for the poison and the knife, there are several possibilities. The person who poisoned the house could be someone inside or outside the house. The attention of people outside the house is naturally on the Qian family having a wedding banquet. The people in the house, except for the servants, had suffered grievances and revenge because of the deceased's bad temper. His wife Yan Jiaying is the most suspect. As far as we know, there was no harmony between the couple, and Yi's decoration was very fashionable and her movements were indeed very free. And the letter found in the desk drawer looked very much like an anonymous letter someone wrote to Yu Gang. You just made a special recording to see what effect it would have. Second, when it comes to murder, I saw Yogang's attire in the tabloids on his desk, his contacts with actresses, and the photos of women in the books in the drawer. It is obvious that he is a womanizer. He was also an alcoholic gambler. He has been showing fear of someone recently. It is also possible to assume that he is jealous because of competition and has any enemies or love rivals outside. In addition, someone may be motivated by money. For example, Kuelin, who quit his job. Will you come back by chance? Or is there some kind of collusion with Jin Shou? And the handyman a lie. Before dinner last night, someone suddenly came to report that his mother was sick, so he took leave to go back, so he seemed to have to think that the coincidence was suspicious. We rely on these 3 reasons. Just follow the old rules and divide the work between each other. Hawthorne went to the target Luyen's house to inquire. Because this move was the most critical, and Yan Jiaying was our client, Hawthorne had to go and see it in person. Yao Guiying took charge of going to Qian's house on Hangkou Road. Investigate what happened at Yogang's wedding reception last night, and who were the people at the table with Yu Gang. I went to Nanshur alone to find our Rong and asked him if he really went home last night. Among them, Inspector Wang's position is the most convenient, and he only investigates in this area. Are there any suspicious people near Zhang's house in recent days? After the plan was settled, the 4 of us came out of Zhang's house. I will go back to my apartment alone. Because that morning, I wore a lot of clothes. At this time, the sun was scorching in the sky and the weather was getting hotter. I had to go back and change into lighter clothes. When I got to the apartment, I went upstairs to change my clothes while thinking about the plot of the case. This is the first time we have solved this kind of double murder case since we started investigating the case. This case looks at the circumstances. Apparently there were 2 murderers, one who poisoned and one who murdered. Hawthorne had assumed that the drunkard's death was due to poisoning, not the stabbing. So who was the poisoner? Is it an outsider or an inside person? If it was someone inside the house, could it be Yogang's wife Yan Jiaying? Judging from the current situation, Yi is the most heavily suspected. But since he murdered her husband, how come she dared to visit us and ask for advice? If you become a thief yourself and help your colleagues to catch the thief, this is a very common and effective way to absolve yourself of the crime. Maybe Yi Lai will ask us. It's just a smoke screen created by Yi to use Hawthorne as a cover to avoid suspicion. If so, how would Hawthorne cope? Will he protect Yi? No, Hawthorne is a man of justice, and the boundaries between public and private are the strictest. I believe that he will never indulge in personal friendships and engage in illegal activities without any reason. But if Yi's murder was justified, or had the repercussions of injustice, how would Hawthorne end this murder? What to do with Yi? I've changed my clothes. I smoked a cigarette again in the office and rested for a while. When the cigarette was burned out, I was about to take my hat and go to Nanshur when I saw Hawthorne walking in with his breath coming. When he saw me, he asked in surprise, "You haven't been to Wangjia Pier yet?" I nodded. I'm just about to leave. In that case, please sit down for a while. I'll go with you. Where are you from? Any clues? I put down my hat and sat down. Hawthorne took out a platinum dragon, lit it and sat on the wicker chair, taking a few puffs comfortably. He replied, I visited the Yan family's neighbors for a while. It is said that after Yan Shuiying returned to her mother's house, she often went out to the game arcade with her young female companions. This is indeed true. Then the words in the anonymous letter don't look like fiction. Yes, part of it is always real. What about others? I also met Yan Shuiying and Yi's brother Yan Shaoshan. What did he say? Of course he tried his best to protect his sister and asked me to figure this out. He said that Yu Gang was a deceitful disciple and had indeed proposed taking concubines, but he did not dare to implement it because of his opposition. According to Yan Jiaying, Yu Gang once expressed his intention to divorce on the grounds that he had no children, but because he was afraid of Yi's brother, he could not give a good reason and did not dare to speak out. In your opinion, is Yan Shuiying suspected of murdering her husband? Hawthorne smoked continuously. There was still no reply, but suddenly the phone rang. He got up hurriedly to pick it up. A while. He came back and reported to me excitedly. The call was from Inspector Wang Xinyan. Although he wanted to work hard, it was a pity that he always failed. This time, it has had some effect. What effect? What's new? He said that he had carefully questioned every police officer in the district. At 11:30 last night, a patrol of police officers passed by the door of the Zhang family's bungalow on Qiujiang Road. They all saw a man in black coming out of the iron gate of Zhang's house. This is what most police officers have seen, and it is certainly not wrong. This discovery cannot but be considered very important in the case. Do you think this person is our ideal assassin? Maybe so. According to Jin Shou, it was 12 o'clock when he and Yan Shuiying walked out of Yan's house last night. It takes at least 10 minutes to take a rickshaw from Qiujiang Road to Mindli on Target Road. When he arrived at Yan's house, he had to wait for more than 10 minutes for his mistress to get up from the bed, wash herself and set off. Combined with the evidence, it can be seen that Jin Shou left Zhang's house at around 11:30. When it's 11:15. The man in black clothes that the police officers saw coming out of Zhang's house was clearly not Jin Shou, but someone else. I believe there is no doubt about this. Good. Apart from Jin Shou, there was no other man in Zhang's family last night. That man must be the murderer. But when do you think this person entered the Zhang family? Jin Shou said that during dinner, he once went to the kitchen to move the dinner. Of course there was no one at the gate at that time. At this moment, if someone sneaks in and hides behind the shade of the tree. Or they could hide in the small garden at the back, waiting for the opportunity to take action, naturally without anyone noticing. Or maybe when Jin Shou went out to report the news at 11:30, the house was quiet instead. It is unknown that the person thought the opportunity was ripe and then quietly entered the house. I retorted, your first reason is too affectionate. I don't agree with your second reason. I think you are still somewhat conflicted. He said in surprise, contradiction? What do you mean? I don't understand. He looked at me with his eyes wide open. I said, Jin Shou went out to report the news after Yu Gang died. How do you say the murderer entered the house after Jin Shou left? Hawthorne still looked at me. Well, is this what you call a contradiction? In fact, you are too careless yourself. You have to know this is a double murder. I was stunned for a moment, unable to answer, so I used a cigarette to cover up my confusion. Hawthorne continued, although, you may have your understanding. Now let's talk about your imagined behavior towards that person. I do have a presumptive understanding of this person. Since Hawthorne asked me to talk, I might as well take the opportunity to discuss it with him. I blew out a puff of smoke and said, I also assumed that the man sneaked into the door during dinner and hid behind the tree. This is the same as your opinion. It wasn't until 10 o'clock that someone came back from outside and entered the study. The man first went outside the window and stood on tiptoe to look into the study room, so there was a half-deep footprint on the grass under the window. Then he walked into the study and met Yu Gang. Whether that person came here seeking revenge or asking for something from Yu Gang, I don't know. But looking at the sounds and traces of their quarrel, it was obvious that they had used force at first. Later, when Yu Gang couldn't win, he was stabbed to death by that man. The man took the key again, opened the iron box, stole the money, and then went out quietly. Do you think it is right? Hawthorne frowned. He looked straight at the carpet, shook his head and said, No. The only difference between your assumptions and mine is the cause of death. Are you saying that Yu Gang must have been killed by poison, not a knife? Yes. I believe so. I dare say they didn't use force. But seeing that the gold watch on Yu Gang's body was not damaged at all is a clear proof. I thought he must have died from poison. But medical officer Su hasn't proved it yet. His certificate is just a legal formality. In fact, I have already determined this. Meet. Are you laughing at my boast? I'll tell you. There are fresh scars, you can see them too. His wound was flat and there were no blood stains around it. It was obvious that when the knife was stabbed, the blood flow to his body had stopped and the muscles and skin had lost their elasticity. Therefore, there are no signs of curling around the wound. This is an ordinary reaction in life. And there was only some blood on his shirt, not bright red blood. Isn't this proof of posthumous assassination? Based on this layer, it can be seen that the assassin must have entered after Jin Shou went out. You can't say I'm contradictory. Moreover, Jin Shou only knew about Yu Gang Chi Ju at that time. Jin Shou did not look at whether there were knife marks on Yu Gang's body at that time. So I guess that the man's assassination must have happened when Jin Shou went out to report the news and Yu Gang's mother and sister were upstairs. Even assuming that the man sneaked in at this time, it is not necessarily impossible. Then how to explain the quarrel? Could it be that the murderer argued with Yu Gang for a while, then withdrew, waiting for Jin Shou to go out before going in? No, this is unreasonable. If anyone really quarreled with Yu Gang, you remember he tended to get drunk and crazy alone. It must have been another person. In short, I believe that the quarrel and the assassination were never at the same time, nor by the same person. This explanation is indeed possible based on the situation, and I couldn't help but secretly nod. However, based on the situation, in addition to the poisoning and assassination, there is also the possibility of another person quarreling. It's a little more complicated. At the same time, I also thought that my inspection of injuries was not as precise as his. Hawthorne took a few puffs of cigarette and then said, In this way, we can draw a conclusion that the person who committed the assassination was the secondary culprit in this case, not the main culprit. The main culprit was the person who poisoned. I responded. Well, if so, who do you think the assassin was? Hawthorne frowned and said, This still needs to be investigated. For example, Jin Shou mentioned the short-sighted guy wearing convex crystal glasses, the tall man in a suit, and the servant around Kuelin, etc. All must be investigated. At least we have to listen to Inspector Yao's investigation results before proceeding. So who is the main culprit of the poisoning? Do you have an idea? Hawthorne shook his head. I'm not sure who this person is yet. I think this subject is very complex. I prompted, you gang had a wedding reception last night. Could he have been poisoned at Qian's house? This is just one aspect of the question and cannot be settled. Is there another aspect? Yes. There are also aspects inside the house that cannot be ignored. I asked in surprise, oh. Do you think it was someone inside the house who did it? Is there any basis for this? Hawthorne rubbed out the end of his cigarette and said, it is based on nature, and it is very ready. You probably saw it too. Well, what? I'm really a little confused. Hawthorne simply replied, the teapot on the desk Lingling. Lingling. Lingling, The ringing of the phone interrupted Hawthorne's words. I saw Hawthorne lying down with his legs stretched out, so I got up to pick him up for him. The call was from Medical Officer Su Jiren. He had tested the vomited contents in the spittoon and found that the deceased had indeed drank too much Fengjiu, and the wine did contain arsenic. The black tea in the teapot has been carefully tested, but there is no trace of poison at all. Because of Hawthorne. He had been told to pay attention to the question of poisoning or killing, so he first informed Hawthorne of the test results. The prosecutor has not yet arrived for the autopsy of the body, so he has not started yet. I passed this to Hawthorne. Hawthorne suddenly lit another cigarette, frowned, lowered his head and said nothing. I don't know what he was thinking. This notice is a definite confirmation of his clear understanding of poisoning. Why was he disappointed? I asked, Hawthorne, what are you thinking about? I was thinking that Fengjiu is the most violent, that's why the toxicity attacks so quickly. That's right. Now that we have listened to Dr. Su's words, our understanding of poisoning has finally narrowed down a bit, and we have found a quicker way. Yes or no? Huasang suddenly took out the cigarette and raised his head. Bao Lang, what you mean is, since there is a relationship between wine and poison, if we want to investigate the cause of the poison, we only need to pay attention to the wedding wine of the Qian family. Yes. What do you mean? I think his question was too abrupt. It seems to have another meaning. Hawthorne didn't answer. His head suddenly lowered, he put the cigarette between his lips again, and returned to his previous state of frowning and deep thought. I added, just now you mentioned the teapot. Now it has been proven that there is no poison in the tea, the poison is in the wine. Do you have any questions? Hawthorne slowly raised his head, a little bit, but his eyebrows were still deeply furrowed. I asked again, in any case, the mission to investigate Qian's house must be very important. Do you think Yao Guiying can take the responsibility? Hawthorne still lowered his head. Slowly replied, I have met with him several times before, and I think he is still modest. Therefore, he will not cause any trouble when he works with me this time. Unfortunately, his observation skills are not very accurate, and his knowledge is also poor. These are his shortcomings. So you want this? Could he be happy and competent? I hope he can succeed. Judging from the current situation, his responsibility is indeed very important. Oh, someone is coming from outside. Sure enough, I heard questions and answers in front of the door, and then I saw Shirgui walking in holding a famous thorn. 7. Rong. The visitor is the Yao Guiying we are looking forward to. His presence gives me hope of unraveling the mystery, and we certainly welcome him. Yao Guiying walked into our office, greeted each other a few words, and sat on the wicker chair opposite us. Hawthorne rushed to say, Brother Guiying, Are you coming from Qian's house on Hankow Road? I don't think Zhang Yugang went to Qian's house for a wedding banquet last night. Yes or no? Yao Guiying's eyes showed a look of surprise. Mr. Hua, what basis do you have for thinking this way? Hawthorne was stunned for a moment. What? Did I make a mistake? Yao Guiying nodded. I asked the groom Qian Buxiong and Zhang Yugang did go there last night. Hawthorne's eyes rolled a few times, and he suddenly sat up straight, as if this move was beyond his surprise and a little disappointed. He said, Been there? Then I guess he has never had a wedding banquet at Qian's house. Is this wrong? Yao Guiying's eyes opened even wider. That's not bad. He sat at Qian's house for a short time before leaving, and he really didn't drink. Mr. Hua, how did you know? Could it be that you have gone to Qian's house? Hawthorne breathed a sigh of relief, shook his hand and said, No. I just made up the idea a few minutes ago that Zhang Yugang would not drink at Qian's house. I have never been to Qian's house. Inspector Yao's eyes narrowed a little, but he still blinked. He looked at me. I exchanged glances with him, but I could not alleviate his doubts, because I could not figure out what Hawthorne's suspicion was based on. After a while, Yao Guiying said, Mr. Hua, since you know that he has never drank alcohol, you may have the same opinion as me. What's your opinion? Yugang didn't drink, so his behavior last night clearly wasn't drunk. Moreover, Jin Shou said that he felt that his master's words, which were drunk when he spoke, were clearly not true. In this way, there is great research value here. Mr. Hua, do you agree? Hawthorne smiled slightly and said, Brother Guiying, I'm sorry, I can't agree. Huh? A look of disappointment moved to Guiying's face. I know that although Yugang didn't drink at Qian's house, he drank in other places. You probably haven't found out yet. Yao Guiying blushed. Chi said, Yes, I only know that he went to Qian's house at 6 o'clock. Then he suddenly received a phone call and left the host. Did he drink after leaving Qian's house? Wine, I really haven't figured it out yet. Mr. Hua, how do you know? Hua Sang said lightly, There is a question of whether to drink or not. We just smelled the smell in the spittoon and already knew it. But the place where he drank was not at Qian's house, but somewhere else. I just received a call from Su Jiren, so I was sure that according to medical officer's examination. You just drank too much Fenjiu. Fenjiu is a baijiu, the strongest form of sorghum liquor. You always know the customs in Shanghai. Liquor is only used for funerals, and Shaoxing wine is always used for weddings and festivals. Since what you just drank was white wine, it can be seen that he must not have been drunk at Qian's house. Hawthorne's explanation killed two birds with one stone. Yao Guiying and I had doubts. Only then did I realize that his sudden question was not out of thin air. Hawthorne asked Yao Guiying, In this way, does it matter? I just arrived at Qian's house yesterday. Later, he was called out of Qian's home by that phone call. Yes or no? Exactly. Who was the person who called Yugang? I also asked Qian Buxiong, but Yugang did not explain at the time. He only said that he had an important appointment and had to go. So after I just left the Qian family. I haven't found out who I was dating, where the date was, or what we were talking about. So was that phone date expected, or did it happen by chance? Have you ever asked Chamber Bear? Like it happened by accident. Because I had just apologized to my host when I was leaving. He said that he had gone specially to have a wedding banquet, but unexpectedly he had this unexpected date. This shows that the date was not what he expected. Hawthorne closed his eyes and thought for a while, then said, "On the basis of feelings. Of course this date has something to do with this murder. Although we don't know who that person is now, it doesn't seem to be very difficult to trace his footprints." Yao Guiying said happily, "That's good. Mr. Hua, do you have any methods to get started?" I guessed that that person was not only acquainted with Yu Gang, but also a friend of Qian Buxiong. But it was obvious that he knew the phone number of the Qian family and knew that yesterday was Buxiong's wedding. He expected that Zhang Yugang would go to the wedding banquet, so he called the Qian family to look for him. I also guessed that the place where they dated must be in a wine shop that specializes in drinking. All they drank was Fengjiu. Fengjiu is only available in wine shops that specialize in wine, and it is drunk by people who are good at drinking. It is obvious that the man Yu Gang is also an old drinker. It might be easier to find out based on these two clues. As for the things discussed, although I can't guess out of thin air, it is probably always a secret that cannot be told. In that case, I just need to go to this wine shop to inquire about it. Good. Nowadays, the larger liquor stores probably have telephones installed. You might as well go to those wine shops and ask, maybe you can get some clues. Did you get any other news? I went to Xinxin Flour Company again and asked. It proved that the anonymous letter was written by Yu Gang. I also know that although Yu Gang works in the company in name, he actually does not have a specified time to work in the company. Because the company manager Shen is an old friend of the father who has a stepfather, and he is usually a bit laissez-faire and stubborn. So Yu Gang is free to spend his time outside. I think he must have a wide range of contacts. Have you ever investigated whether any of his friends have any grudge against him? Yao Guiying responded, I have asked several of them, according to one of his colleagues named Yang. Yu Gang has a bad temper and would fall out with others from time to time. A warehouseman in the company, well, his name was Fu Jingsan, had a fight with Yu Gang over the issue of the popular actress, and an old classmate of Yu Gang named Yu also came to the company over gambling. Make a big noise in the company. However, there was a man named Zhang Jilian who seemed to have a deeper hatred for Yu Gang. Hawthorne seemed to be moved by these words. Oh, do you know what's going on? I also asked about it, but I couldn't get the details. All I know is that they were neighbors at first and were very friendly with each other. Zhang Jilian was still studying in some university. He often went in and out of Yogang's house and had close contact with him. Later, for some unknown reason, Yu Gang often spoke ill of Zhang Jilian behind his back. Not only that, Yu Gang also showed an attitude of fear of Jilian, as if he was afraid that he would seek revenge. But what is the truth behind the scenes? Not only the man named Yang doesn't understand, but no one else knows either. Where is this Zhang Jilian now? Yao Guiying glared at Guiying and said, I don't know. It is said that Zhang Jilian disappeared a month ago. Disappointing. Not only did Hawthorne frown and lower his head again, but I was also overjoyed. It was just like when I was lost in the dark night and suddenly saw a flash of light in the distance. I felt naturally happy in my heart. But just as he was about to run forward and take the right path, the light disappeared in an instant and he was plunged into darkness again. At this time, I suddenly remembered the two people who asked for letters that Jin Shou said. I asked, Inspector Yao, how is Zhang Jilian's appearance? Yao Guiying said. It is said that he is a man who often wears suits and is about 26 or 17 years old. Is he a tall man? No. I also asked, are you tall and thin, shorter than me? But myopia wearing convex crystal glasses? No. The person surnamed Yang said that he does not wear glasses and is a handsome young man. Both firecrackers were discouraged. I feel a little bored. Hawthorne suddenly raised his head. Bao Lang, why are you so forgetful? He has never seen the man wearing convex crystal glasses that Jean Shou mentioned. He has only seen the tall man in a suit once. But as far as Brother Guiying knows, Jiang Zhilian often comes in and out of the Zhang family. This is obviously another person, not the two people Jean Shou mentioned. The accusation is not without purpose. I only admit that I was careless. Yao Guiying took advantage of my silence. Also asked Hawthorne about the results of the investigation into the Yen family. Hua Sang carefully told Yao Guiying the situation he had discovered and the reports from Inspector Wang, Dr. Su and others. Yao Guiying also believed that the person coming out of Zhang's house discovered by the patrol policeman in the middle of the night was very important. But he thought that except for the missing Jiang Zhilian, the stranger wearing glasses asking for a letter, and the eldest son in a suit who visited Yu Gang yesterday afternoon, the servant Arong and the coachman Kuelin who had already left were also suspected. Hawthorne also agreed, and decided to start by asking about Arong's actions. Yao Guiying promised to visit the people who drank with Zhang Yugang last night. After the discussion was settled, Yao Guiying said goodbye and went out. I continued my original mission and set off with Hawthorne to Wangjia Wharf in Nanshur to visit Arong. According to Jean Shou, Arong went home in the evening yesterday. At that time, Yu Gang had already withdrawn money from the bank and returned home. Because Hua Sang had called Hujiang Bank and learned that a withdrawal had just been made just before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the withdrawal was 1,500 yuan in banknotes, so Arong's sudden leave to go back was actually unavoidable. Somewhat suspicious. Arrive at Wangjia Pier. Hua Sang and I searched according to the address mentioned by Jean Shou, and sure enough we found Arong's house in an alley. Arong is from Chongming. He has a mother and lives with his brother and sister-in-law. The house they live in is a very humble bungalow. Very dilapidated. At that time, the small door, half rotten and half blackened by the wind and rain, was quietly closed. Hawthorne looked at the door for a while, then went in. He saw an old woman leaning against the steps and doing laundry across the door, so he walked up and struck up a conversation. Hawthorne said, "Old lady, are you busy? Well, your laundry is so white. I'm sorry, I have to ask a question. Is this diagonally across the door from Arong's home?" The old woman looked up and saw that we were all wearing neat suits, so she answered with a smile. "Really? Clothes play a subtle role in the city." He said, "Sir, are you asking about Axi's family?" "Oh, yes." "Oh, that's right. Axi also has a younger brother, Arong." "Exactly. Is their mother at home?" "Well, how can he go out? Sister-in-law Wang was very ill a few days ago. It's just better today. Shang Yi's youngest son also came back specially last night. His name is Arong. Have you seen Arong last night?" The old woman seemed to be interested in chatting. She stood up straight and wiped her hands dry on the patchwork green cloth she was wearing. He said, "Why not? I also saw him go back. It was very late by then." Hawthorne's eyes flashed slightly, and then he quickly turned his head and glanced at the entrance of the alley, as if to hide his eyes and prevent his surprised expression from being seen by the old woman. I also feel that this question really contains a flaw. Rong didn't live in his own home last night. But he clearly didn't return to his master's house. Where did he go? Hua Sang continued to ask, "Hey, old lady, what did you see when Rong went back? When was that time, do you still remember?" The old woman said, "Last night I knew that sister-in-law Wang was very ill and there were not many people at home, so I went over to stay with her in the middle of the night. Sir, golden neighbors, silver relatives. When we poor people have something to do, we can only rely on our neighbors for help." Well, you are so warm-hearted. Do you know how Rong came back? Oh, sir, you always know that she eats on the pier. If he doesn't do anything for a day, he won't live for a day. But people are very filial and well-behaved. He was a little panicked when he saw that his mother's cold and fever persisted. So yesterday he asked a friend to send a message to his brother Rong. Rong did come back during dinner, and I saw him too. He also chatted with me for a while. Rong, like his brother, is a well-behaved person. He said that his master's house was short of servants. I had to go back overnight. So it's about after the second update, right? He went back again. I hadn't left yet at that time. After hearing this, Hawthorne stopped asking any more questions, thanked him, and turned around to knock on the door of Rong's house. After a while, inside, a middle-aged woman with disheveled hair and greasy rags came out to say hello. Hawthorne said politely, "We are coming from Hongkou, and we have a message for you." After saying this, he stared at the woman blankly. It seems that he wants to check if there is any surprise in Yi's color. The woman hurriedly put on a smile and replied, "Gentlemen, are you bringing a letter to your uncle? Do you want to sit inside?" Hawthorne still looked at Yi's face and replied, "No, thank you, we are not coming in. Rong asked us to ask. Is your mother-in-law feeling better today?" The woman said, "Thank you, sir, my mother-in-law's fever is much better today. Please reply to a letter for me, uncle, please don't worry." Hawthorne nodded and took advantage of the situation to look inside. I saw a dark small room separated by a reed mat. There were several old chairs, tables, household buckets, and basins arranged vertically and horizontally. This scene is enough to show that the situation of Rong's family is really very poor. When we turned back out of the alley, Hawthorne suddenly whispered in my ear, "Bao Lang, this trip is really interesting. Our case has gone one step further." 8. The murderous knife. The passengers on the tram were most crowded during lunchtime. I got on the tram and wanted to talk to Hawthorne about Rong's problem, but there were so many people and it was inconvenient to talk. Rong's failure to return last night seemed to Hawthorne. It seems that he is related to the murder. What I mean is slightly different. Because Rong's return home was indeed due to his mother's illness. It can be seen that the reason we originally assumed that he might be motivated by wealth and return home with some excuse is no longer valid. But he obviously returned to his master's house that night. Why is there no trace of him so far? Did something unexpected happen to him? Or did he really have an assassination attempt on his master, so he avoided showing up? Look at it from all aspects. Yogang's temperament is stubborn and irritable, and of course it is easy to make enemies with others. Could it be that Rong and his master had some unresolved grudges and went so far as to commit murder in revenge? If so, since he has disappeared without a trace at this time, it will definitely not be easy to find him. So what does Hawthorne mean by the progress in the case? When we returned to the apartment, Gui hurriedly reported, He said, "Inspector Yao called just now, saying that he had found out that the dringer's surname was Jia, and he was a regular customer of Zhang Dongming Hotel. There every night. Inspector Yao is going to see him tonight." Hawthorne nodded and ordered to prepare for dinner. We had been busy for a long time, and now we had to sit down. But because I still had no clue about the case, I was unsettled, and there seemed to be a dam built in my chest. "I can't eat any more." Hawthorne remained calm as usual, but he only ate and drank and did not say a word about the case. After dinner, I couldn't bear it anymore, so I took advantage of my smoking break to discuss it with Hawthorne. I said, "You just said that this case has taken another step forward. But you mean Arong's whereabouts are unknown?" Hawthorne nodded and said, "Exactly. I think Arong's one-night absence is the only clue in the whole case." "How can we see it?" "As soon as he heard about his mother's illness yesterday, he quickly took leave and went back. This shows that he is a filial son. Therefore, we can infer his usual conduct. When he arrived at home, because of his master's duties, he rushed back all night and did not dare to stay. It can be seen that he is a law-abiding person. Looking at these 2 points, we can infer that he did not return last night. Of course, there won't be any misbehavior of prostitutes." "What is that?" "Of course it has something to do with the case. In this way, he is a good person, but why would he do such a thing? This is difficult to determine. His family was very poor and his mother was ill in bed, so money was certainly needed. If an uneducated or weak-willed person encounters a highly tempting environment, the consequences are uncertain. Arong may have been tempted by this and saw the benefits and forgot the harm, but that cannot be said to be impossible. Although, even if he needs money, he commits murder. Even if he paid the price with his life, it seemed that he would not make such a foolish move." Hawthorne flicked some ashes from his cigarette, looked at me and said with a smile, "Bao Lang, why do you keep saying that he committed the murder? I have already said that Yogang's fatality lies in the poison rather than the knife. Don't you still believe it? Besides, I only said that Arong was a clue in the whole case, and I never said that he was the murderer. Didn't you hear clearly?" I also smiled and said, okay. I misunderstood. Now how do you plan to proceed?" "Now I plan to take a rest and wait for the opportunity to evolve." What? Aren't you planning to proceed with such a mysterious case urgently? Hawthorne took a puff of smoke slowly and said calmly, "Bao Lang, don't be impatient. I hope this case will be settled as quickly as you hope. But you should also know about our detective work. There is a distinction between urgency and urgency. It's better to be hasty, of course, you can't slow down for a second, it's better to be slow, but you can't be anxious, because being anxious will cause bad things. I am already confident about this case. Judging from the current situation, it is appropriate to proceed slowly rather than hastily." His discussion. It seemed to have some preaching meaning, which made me a little impatient, but the last sentence of "well-informed" was very attractive. I asked, "Do you think this case should be slowed down rather than urgently? What's the reason?" Hawthorne thought for a moment and then said, "That's fine. I dare say that the murderers in this case were all acquaintances of the deceased. It would be easier for the murderer to slip through the net if there was a slight delay. Since this case was discovered late and the circumstances of the case are so complicated and mysterious, the murderer can rest easy. There is no need to rush away. In this way, we might as well proceed step by step without having to rush around. There is another reason. Now that we have discovered two doubtful points, of course we cannot proceed beyond the level before fully explaining them. Those two doubts. First, since Yao Guiying was able to interview Jia, who drank with Zhang Yugang, this person must be related, and he must first find out. Secondly, our Rong must also try to find him, and only then can we understand the truth in the case. Both of these things can only wait for development and cannot be rushed forward. Do you think so? If you want to see the person named Jia, you have to wait until night, but if you want to find our Rong, why can't you do it quickly? Although I am eager to know the traces of a Rong, there is no point in being anxious. We can only wait for him to show up. If we were to prevent him from escaping, he would have had many opportunities last night, but now even if he wanted to pursue him, it would be too late. You just sit and wait for him? Will he show up on his own? Yes. I believe so. But I am also prepared to ambush a chess piece. I have to make a call to Inspector Jiang Xinyan and ask him to send someone to our Rong's house to get an extra, alas. Is that Inspector Wang outside? Hey, what a coincidence. Sure enough, I heard the front door ringing. When I looked back, Inspector Wang had already hurriedly opened the door and walked in. His fat head was held high, as if a new steel bone had been installed around his neck. His thick waist was also straight, and his attitude had a sultry appeal. Hawthorne greeted, "Mr. Wang, I'm just about to talk to you." "You're here, no matter how good it is, then." Before he could utter the word "no," he suddenly stopped. His eyes turned rapidly, and his expression suddenly changed. He stared blankly at Wang Xinyan's face, showing a surprised look. "Wang Inspector, have you discovered anything new?" Inspector Wang nodded several times, touched his short beard, reached into his pocket and took out a long small paper bag, and answered breathlessly. "Yes. Mr. Hua, look, can this be considered an important discovery?" Hawthorne hurriedly took the paper package. "Open it and take a look, it's a knife with a sharp ebony handle." The knife was about 4 or 5 inches long with its handle, sharp and pointed, and polished on both sides without any rust. Hawthorne took a look, stood up quickly and took out a magnifying glass. He examined the knife carefully. He put it to his nostrils and sniffed. His eyes sparkled with excitement. He said, "Oh, this is indeed a murderous knife. It's a pity that the fingerprints are confused. Inspector Wang, where did you find it?" Inspector Wang said, "The things in the corpse room." "Isn't there a window facing an alley?" "Less than 3 feet to the north of the window, there is a wooden barrel collecting garbage. This knife was picked up next to the trash can in the alley." "When did you find it?" "About an hour ago." At that time, because the prosecutor was about to come to the scene for inspection, I took a few police officers to take care of it in advance. I checked in the alley for a while and found this knife. You found it next to the garbage? Yes. On that side of the trash can? On the south side, near the window. Hawthorne touched his chin and thought for a moment, then asked, "But aren't the trash cans in your district cleaned every morning? If so, why didn't the sweeper who swept the trash this morning see this knife? Could it be that after sweeping up the garbage, did someone just leave this knife there?" Inspector Wang said, "No. Although the time for sweeping the trash is set before 9 o'clock every morning, the knife is next to the trash can, about a foot away, and there are some weeds there, so it is not easy to attract attention. There was also a piece of torn newsprint half covered, which seemed to have been blown by the wind. If you don't pay attention, of course you won't see it. Mr. Hua, you know that I went there specially to inspect, so naturally I should leave it alone. So if you must say that the knife was thrown there after 9 o'clock this morning, it would be a little unreasonable. His tone revealed complacency, and his fat head shook a few times involuntarily. Hawthorne nodded and said, well, that's it. Since there is such a plot, my idea cannot be established. In this way, we might as well assume that the murderer opened the east window and threw it out of the window after the stabbing. He turned back and asked me, Bao Lang. Wasn't the east window originally ajar and unbolted? Did you see it anyway? His observation ability is really great. I nodded. I replied, yes. I had carefully inspected the window, and there was no sign of any movement on the iron bars. I concluded that he could not be a conduit for the murderer. But my vision was blocked by the iron bars, so of course I couldn't see the murderous knife under the window. Hawthorne said, I can't blame you. You don't have to defend yourself either. My sight is equally impossible to bend. He looked at the knife carefully for a while. Return it to Inspector Zhang again. Inspector Wang, the fact that you were able to find this knife shows that you are extremely sophisticated. This knife will always be helpful to the progress of the case. Now you should go back quickly and instruct the police officers guarding the front door of Zhang's house. If someone acting suspicious approaches the door, you should be careful not to let him go, and don't rush to alert him. To put it more clearly, we should act on the camera and spy on the actions of suspicious people. Among what I call suspicious people, Rong, who is playing a separate role, is the most important one and deserves special attention. It would be best if you send another person to wait near his home. Is Rong the only one who deserves special attention? I think the gatekeeper Jean Shou also seems to be an important person in the case. Mr. Hua. Do you agree? Jean Shou's position is indeed very important, but when I asked him about it this morning, I felt that his words were coherent and did not look like he was fabricating them. But when I asked him just now, he was hesitant, which made people suspicious. Hawthorne smiled and said, I think if you could change your face towards him, he might not be hesitant anymore. After a few more words of comfort, he sent Wang Ximian out. I waited for Hawthorne to return to the office and raise my doubts again. Hawthorne. What clues can you get from this knife? Hawthorne said, I think that knife is an ordinary fruit knife. Although the knives are new, they have been sharpened several times and some have no rust spots. This can be imagined as a hard-working attitude of that person. Furthermore, it can be imagined that the person has been holding a grudge for a long time. I said, do you have any other opinions? Hawthorne didn't seem to listen. He leaned up and said hesitantly, I plan to go to Zhang's house again. The unexpected setback disturbed my questions and Hawthorne's expression. The ringtone in the phone room rang again. 9. An unexpected discovery. This time the news on the phone was like a thunderbolt in the sky. It was so unexpected. The caller was Medical Officer Su Jiren. Apart from his title, he only had 3 sentences, which were crisp and brief. Those 3 sentences are, I have found the real culprit in this case. Just wait, I will come right away. This news also stimulated Hawthorne quite a lot. It was obvious that it came out of the blue and was not what he expected. He put his hands in his pockets and frowned. He kept pacing back and forth in the room, muttering in his mouth. Strange. I can't believe it. His job is to test, how could he get the real murderer? We tried our best as 4 people and worked for a long time, but before we reached the stage of success, he got ahead of himself. Just lift your finger and enjoy the results. So strange. I said, you always believe that things are ever-changing, and there are often things that are beyond reason. But this move is so weird. Hawthorne stopped and raised his head. Bao Lang, when you listened to his report, did you only hear these 3 sentences? I smiled and said, yes. If you want to teach me to add a few words because you can't figure out the reason, I can't make it up. Hawthorne ignored it. He put his hands behind his back and continued to pace. His eyes were lowered, as if admiring the patterns on the carpet. After a while he stood firm again. Asked, Bao Lang, did you hear clearly the first phone call from Dr. Su? If his questions were not abrupt, they were almost boring. It was obvious that he was rambling because he couldn't figure out the reason behind them. I couldn't help but be secretly amused. I replied, why is it unclear? He didn't say many words at that time. Do you want me to say it again? He said that the stuff he had just vomited contained fengio and arsenic, but there was no poison in the tea. He also said that the prosecutor. Hawthorne waved his hand to stop me. Okay. Don't make trouble unreasonably. I laughed and said, then you have to be more patient yourself. Just now you said that this case should be slowed down rather than rushed. Why is it so urgent all of a sudden? Hawthorne said, didn't I also say that the time has changed? At this moment, the change has been realized. So of course I have to change the priorities I mentioned. He is still swirling. I said, although, Medical Officer Su said, he will come immediately. As soon as he arrives, the mystery will be clear, and it will not be too late to proceed with the plan then. In any case, there is no need for you to panic. Hawthorne didn't seem to listen. He raised his watch to look at it and said, well, there are 10 minutes at most. He can probably get here. I laughed again. You are still so anxious. Could it be that you have a radio in your heart? Hawthorne said to himself. I guess his unexpected discovery must have been made during the Zhang family's autopsy. There was no phone in the Zhang family's house, so it was known that he had left the Zhang family when he called. Even though it only takes a quarter of an hour to get here from Zhangjia by car, 5 minutes have passed now. Wouldn't it be possible for him to arrive in just 10 more minutes? I responded, I also hope that he can arrive soon so that he can liberate us from the maze. Just smoke a cigarette and be quiet. I have always admired Hawthorne's calm spirit when responding to emergencies. But this time he was so anxious and impatient, which naturally made me feel strange. Maybe there is some special reason why he is like this? Probably this news, not only did he never expect it, but if it was true, it may also completely eliminate all the assumptions in his mind. While he was surprised, he couldn't help himself. Hawthorne actually sat down and took out the cigarette box. We smoked for a while, both in silence. I looked at Hawthorne's face through the smoke. He was solemn and quiet, his eyelashes drooped, but his eyes kept blinking. He was obviously trying hard to think. If the process of his thought could be extended, I believe it would be more than enough to cross the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly Hawthorne raised his head. Dr. Su is here. I listened carefully, but there was no sound. Could it be that he was lost in thought? Hawthorne had jumped up from his chair, opened the office door and walked out. I followed to the door of the office and heard the sound of a car outside the door. Sure enough, someone came. After a while, Su Jiren walked in, and Hawthorne skipped the courtesy and was busy asking questions. He said, "Mr. Su, didn't you say that the murderer has already obtained it?" Su Jiren nodded and reached out to touch his chest pocket. He replied, "Exactly." Hawthorne asked again, "But Eli is back?" Su Jiren shook his head. He had already taken out a notebook. Hawthorne repeated the question in disappointment. Arong didn't come back? No. So, who is the murderer you are talking about? Here. The murderer's name is Jia Ziqing. Su Jiren was looking through his manual. Hawthorne stared at him intently. I couldn't help but be startled.